So today's video is all about the band that gave me the kick up the arse to get the label started going again. That band is Annalise. So obviously if you've seen some of the other videos on the label, you'll know that obviously my association with Annalise started actually way before 1999. We can go all the way back to the days of Wordbug. And I ended up putting out the first CD EP by Annalise on Out of Order Records in 1995, which was in effect Wordbug's last session, and at that point the band decided to change their name to Annalise. Probably in hindsight it was kind of not really an Annalise release. You could argue that it was really Wordbug repackaged. Yeah, so, and obviously it didn't go to plan. If you've seen the Story of Out of Order Records video, you'll hear all about that. That, you know, we thought everything was in place, and then it just didn't sell the way that we anticipated it to for various reasons that I go into on that. Obviously, fast forward through those years, in the Wilderness years, Annalise had hooked up with Pig Dog Records, which was run by Russell, who obviously would do Fracture fanzine and also be in Scarpa as well. So they found a natural home sort of on Pig Dog, and I think in '97 they put out the Always 18 mini CD, which contained some new songs and also the tracks that we hadn't included from the Fettered session that had been recorded back then. And then they did another mini CD called Something's Got to Give in 1998, and obviously I wasn't in touch with the band at that point, but we did actually press those at Making where I was working, so I did see them go through the plant. As I mentioned on another video, I started speaking to Ace Records about doing reissues of some old UK bands for them, and one of the bands that I was really keen to do was Wordbug, obviously, because Losing It All I thought was kind of one of the standout releases that we'd done in the first era of Boss Tuneage. So that got me back in touch with Ed, and Ed was to give me a cassette of Signposts and Alleyways and some of the songs that would end up being the Our Story Goes Like This album that Pig Dog released. And I just remember when I actually heard Signposts and Alleyways and those songs, it was like, yes, this is what Annalise have been kind of building up to. It's kind of like everything had finally clicked. And it's a cracking album, Our Story Goes Like This. I think it's one of the best sort of late 90s UK punk albums out there. So if you're not familiar with it, you need to check it out. And obviously doing the Signposts and Alleyways 7-inch, as I think I said on that video, it sort of opened a lot of doors into getting our stuff into Japan finally. You know, Steve Lamacq played it on Six Music, I think, at the time, or even the evening session, if he was doing the evening session back in the late 90s, I can't remember now, but he played it on the radio anyway. And so yeah, so it was really good, and you know, so they were the sort of the linchpin band that made me getting back and doing the label again a reality. And obviously I dealt a lot with like Ed and Dave's own Hometown Atrocities label back in the day with the Wordbug co-releases and things like that. And Ed had this project that he was putting together at the time called Year Zero, which was a Exeter punk sort of compilation, which I think was running alongside a sort of an art exhibition about the punk scene of Exeter at the time, and Ed was sort of spent a lot of time compiling it. So Year Zero was completely Ed's baby. I just literally helped helped him press that and distribute it. And of course Year Zero, because it had the track by Headless Chickens and Tom York from Radiohead's first band, it got quite a bit of press in things like Record Collector and such like that. And I do remember, I think at the time that, you know, Tom York was, you know, because you have to remember Radiohead was kind of one of the biggest bands in the world in the late 90s at this point. And I think he was quite cool about it and said, well, as long as it's limited to 1,000 and any royalties of mine are, you know, donated to Friends of the Earth, then go ahead. So yeah, so it went out, and yeah, and like I say, got a lot of good reviews, and it was you know, and it was really nice to be involved in helping Ed distribute and get that one sort of out there. So, but I remember at the same sort of time as Ed was sort of putting that together, there were plans afoot for Annalise to go out to Japan, because obviously Pig Dog had sort of, you know, linked up with Snuffy Smile as I'd intended to on the Fetters CD EP, but it hadn't quite happened. So I think they'd got a Japanese tour organised, and they decided, well, if we're going to Japan, you know, let's stop off on the way. So Ed had some contacts, I think a guy called Joe Kidd, who he'd met in Malaysia, who used to do scene reports out there for Maximum Rock and Roll and things. So I think he got in touch with Joe about Annalise playing some shows in Malaysia, and they'd also been on a comp CD by Rabbit Records in Australia, and I think through that they got the contacts to also get some Australian gigs sorted out. So all of a sudden they had this big tour. Now at the time Russell, I think, was planning, Snuffy Smile basically had done a couple of like English comps of, you know, of UK, the current UK bands, called The Best Punk Rock in England, Son and Man and Friend. They did 3 of them, and I think Russell wanted to return the favour and do an English comp of Japanese bands, and so I think he was kind of tied up with sort of like sorting out that project. So they approached me about wanting to do kind of like a little sort of sampler best of the band at that particular point for that tour, and that's how Tour Issue came about. And we released Tour Issue to coincide with that tour in April 2000. And the band actually went in and recorded a couple of new songs for Tour Issue, including Forget the Girl.
Sweat on my face was turning still.
But I think it was a really big deal at the time when Annalise did go out, because it was sort of like one of the bands from the DIY punk scene was actually going out and doing a significant tour overseas. And apart from like playing in Malaysia, you know, I think they were the first punk band outside of possibly Fugazi to actually go to Malaysia. It was a big deal. And there's some video footage of that as well.
football team. The Aston TV is the cousin of the Queen. The boss is such an asshole that it makes you want to scream. Everybody wants to be a star.
And then I think in Japan, it was just, they were just taken aback with just how popular the band was. I think that kind of Ed has said in the past that they the audience knew the songs better than they did, and they just had an amazing time out in Japan on that tour. You know, and obviously we, through Kaza at Boss Tuneage Japan, we'd been sort of, you know, distributing tour issue there, and it sold really well. I remember also a US label that they were in touch with, Ding Dong Ditch, decided they wanted to release tour issue in the States, so we organised the pressing for them as well for that. So I think there was probably like 2,000 of tour issue made in the end. So apart from the Signpost and Alleyway 7-inch, the Fettered CD EP had obviously gone into that, because by that point, in 1999, a label in Canada called KYMF had combined the Fettered CD with the Always 18 CD. And an extra track called Everyday Killer from that same Fettered session that I think ended up on the Snuffy Smile Best Punk Rock in England, one of those comps. And I think the guy soon after decided he hadn't, you know, he didn't want to carry on doing the label, and had sent Ed sort of like 600 or 700 CDs. So Ed was sat with these CDs thinking, what on earth do I do with those? So I think that I said, well, you know, let's stick them as Boss Tuneage releases, as a Boss Tuneage release, and I'll distribute it out and we'll sell some to Japan and the shops and what have you. So that was actually the very first Boss Tuneage CD of the Inksplat logo years. That was given the prefix Boss Stitch 501. So, you know, I was really pleased to be involved with Annalise, but I knew that sort of like any albums or anything like that would be done by Pig Dog Records, you know, and I was quite cool with that. You know, I'd met Russell by this point, you know, we'd been on tour together, and it was just working really well, the sort of the setup that we had with everything. I mean, Annalise at that point, Ed wouldn't say no to any kind of offer of a record, so there were loads and loads of split 7-inch singles and stuff like that of those songs. So they had numerous releases in sort of 1999, 2000 kind of time, split with bands from all over the world on labels all over the world. So yeah, so you could probably just about get the album across all those singles. So just to sort of recap with, you know, who was in the band around that late 99, early 2000 era, and when they went on tour, the lineup was Adrian Stroud on drums, Martin Edmonds, Ed on vocals, David Goodchild on bass, and also Martin Stroud, who was Aid's brother, had come in on guitar, and by this point a guy called Brian Reed was playing guitar for them as well, and Brian would obviously do Kids Near Water in a couple of years time. It would be pretty darn popular. So yeah, that was the lineup that went over to do this overseas tour. But I think this is perhaps what people outside of the UK don't realise about Annalise, is that obviously they were all working and all had day jobs, so if there was an option to do a tour, they were going to go overseas. So they didn't actually do a mass amount of UK shows. We'd kind of pick and choose the shows that they do, so they ended up sort of appearing at a lot of all-dayers, which you know, where they could get to see other bands as well if they were playing in the UK. But yeah, I think that's sort of like, you know, people probably thought they were a really hard touring band if they didn't live in the UK, but they didn't have like the ability to do tour upon tour. So I think coming into 2001, after that Japanese tour and Australian and Malaysian tour, I think they'd recorded 2 or 3 new songs and wanted to do a single, and at that point I was doing quite a lot of CD singles, sort of packaged as wallets with booklets, because that was like a really easy format for me to ship out to Japan. I think I mentioned on the Unknown video about that as well, and that's where the Too Much Music, Too Many Bands CD single came about.
How many times can you hear the same sound? Same chords and minutes words, cause another song that you've already heard, being played by wannabe rock stars, for the years of nobodies. Playing through it with bass drums and guitars, just waiting for that day, just waiting for that day to come. When someone comes along and waits a magic wand, so this trip big enough to play our song.
And the plan was that the Too Much Music, Too Many Bands single would be sort of like the first single of what was going to be the follow-up album to Our Story Goes Like This, which was called Versus Everything. So after this tour, and sort of like also being championed by Fracture Fanzine, and you know, and having, you know, Boss Tuneage and Pig Dog sort of pushing the band as well, I think that, you know, their popularity within the DIY scene at that point was definitely growing, so a lot of other labels started to take interest in the band as well. So I know that for Versus Everything, you know, Snuffy Smile in Japan wanted to release it over there. Pig Dog would obviously release it in the UK, and also No Idea Records were showing interest of doing it in the US as well. So, you know, I wanted also Versus Everything to be on Boss Tuneage too, if I could. So it started to work out, well, what could I do? And obviously I had quite a good link up with Flight 13 in Germany at that point. So I put forward the idea that I could do it in mainland Europe. Even though obviously Pig Dog would do it in the UK, I'd do it in Europe, Snuffy Smile would do it in Japan, and No Idea would do it in America. So that's what we kind of did, but Pig Dog and myself basically went in on the same pressing, and what we decided to do was do 2 separate inlay cards. So you will see that the CD and the booklet of Versus Everything, if you have the Pig Dog version and the Boss Tuneage version, are identical, apart from the back inlay has each other's labels details on it. Also, by this point in 2001, the company I work for, Key Production, was now using GZ in the Czech Republic to press their records, as well as at the UK plants. And the beauty of GZ was, you know, you have to remember this is when vinyl production was in the doldrums and vinyl plants were scrabbling around for work. GZ would do sort of like really short runs at that point, and they could do picture discs. And I got in my head thinking, well, you know, perhaps I can make a short vinyl run work if I do it as a picture disc, because it means I don't have to print the sleeve. Yet the quality of a picture disc, obviously audio files, it's not going to be as good as, you know, a normal vinyl record. But a picture disc might be a really good solution to getting some of these releases on vinyl as well as CD. So I put forward to do Versus Everything on vinyl and do it as a picture disc, and the band agreed. And so Versus Everything appeared finally, I think, in the autumn of 2001. And it was another really good, strong album. Personally, for my own personal opinion, I don't think it's quite as good as Our Story Goes Like This. I think, though, that there was some brilliant songs, and some of their best songs that they actually did are on Versus Everything. And so I remember in September 2001 we did this mammoth all-dayer in association with another label called Dislocate Records, which was called Too Much Music, Too Many Bands. And the reason we called it that was because obviously not only after the Annalise song, but we had 30 bands play on 2 stages in one day at this gig. It was crackers. And so Annalise would always be sort of like one of the names I'd always ask if I was doing sort of like a big all-day gig, if they could come up for it, and I think they really enjoyed them. And I think following that they were getting offered tours in America, Japan again and stuff, and I think it was just getting harder and harder, because I think at that point Brian's time was being taken up more and more with Kids Near Water, and other band members just didn't have, you know, had limited holiday allocation from work in order to do these tours. So as we head into like 2003, I think that No Idea Records were really keen that they wanted to do the next Annalise album. And I think they wanted to solely do it. I seem to remember that you know, they wanted to basically, you know, and you have to remember at this point No Idea was becoming quite a big label and quite a successful label. So I remember that they'd recorded a couple of songs sort of in advance of the album, and I was sort of in contact with Var from No Idea at that point, and we put together an idea of doing an Annalise Gunmole split 7-inch. So I pressed it in Europe, and we did it as sort of like clear vinyl with an orange splatter, and then Var did a separate pressing in America as well.
Smashed ambitions and broken dreams, 95 and it's the same old scene. But what the hell are you doing now? Don't you know that this is history that you're glancing at on TV as you try to buy and sell? Planes are crashing into buildings, but you barely bat an eye. Too busy thinking about this month pay. Bankruptcy won't take away. Superheroes, we're superheroes. Superheroes, walking to keep the wolf from the door.
But I don't think there was ever any plan for us to be involved with that next album from memory. It sort of then, as we come into 2004, is when I had to sort of like, you know, take the foot off the gas and really rethink what I was doing with the label. But you know, the final Annalise album to date, Here's to Hope, came out in 2005. I think soon after that there was sort of like, I think that sort of like Ed was, you know, about to become a dad, and I think that sort of like the whole idea of carrying on touring was not really an option for him. I think, you know, he wanted to sort of like dedicate his time to you know, being a dad, which is why that sort of Annalise sort of kind of stopped at that point. But you know, I've kept in touch with Ed sporadically over the years still. He did a one-off project called Here Come the Intrepids after that. You know, I think nowadays he's doing a podcast called Generating Steam Heat, which is a really interesting listen as well, which you should check out. And of course David has been running the Cavern Club in Exeter for many years now, so is still, you know, involved in that, in bringing bands into Exeter and you know, a focal point of that scene. So yeah, Annalise, brilliant band. You know, I'm hoping that if you're watching this, there's probably a good chance that you do already know them. So I'd recommend Our Story Goes Like This, even though it's not a Boss Tuneage release, as your absolute best place to start off with Annalise and listen to what was a really important band in that whole era for the UK scene, and a brilliant band that I was really pleased to see flourish and be involved with. That's it for this time. See you on the next one.
It seems so far somehow. Now that it's justified, something as simple as a hotel.